Fellas, it is finally time once again, as Blue Archive's 4.5 anniversary is at long last arriving to Global this Tuesday as part of the new event, Summer Sky's Promise. And to kick things off, both Swimsuit Seia and Swimsuit Hasumi's banners are first arriving this week as the new limited 3-star units, whereas Swimsuit Ichika is the event's welfare student. Meanwhile, Swimsuit Mika and Swimsuit Nagisa will only be debuting as the 4.5 Fest units in Global next week. Also remember that we will be getting free 100 pulls over the course of Swimsuit Seia and Swimsuit Hasumi's banners, and these free pulls only apply to these two banners. They do not carry over to Swimsuit Nagisa's and Swimsuit Mika's, so try to log in every day for this period to automatically claim them. In this video, I'll be reviewing Swimsuit Seia, while Swimsuit Hasumi and Swimsuit Ichika will be reviewed in a separate video. Link in the pinned comment once it's up. Anyways, without further ado, here is a short review of Swimsuit Seia. Boys, now that the 4.5 anniversary is here, we gotta talk about our adorable Trinity girls in their amazing fashionable swimsuits. And who better to kick things off with than the leader of Trinity's Sanctus faction is the Tea Party's Fox Kani, who is donning a gorgeous swimsuit and looks chiller than ever before. It's Swimsuit Seia! Fellas, I can't put into words how much I am in awe of her new swimsuit. It really encapsulates the cool, sexy Seia vibe that a lot of us joke about, while also showcasing how adorable, cute, and funny she still is. Koko Sando Sensei, I knew. For one, I really like her new side ponytail. I think it's such an underrated hairstyle alongside these swept bangs covering her left eye. Not to mention, combined with those orange sunglasses and that visor hat, this new look has definitely shifted her vibe from a prim and proper girl to a classy, wealthy, and demure lady who's visiting one of her private beaches and is ready to sunbathe all day with servants by her side. We also gotta talk about that white one-piece swimsuit and the big yellow jacket. Good golly gumdrops, fellas, I'm on my knees. It is so freaking hot. This small diamond-shaped opening near her petite chest, I wanna put my bina through it and rub all over. That cute visible tummy that will give birth to at least 10 kids, as well as those swimsuit lines down there that's activating my neurons. Her swimsuit is truly peak Kani. Aside from her design, I'm also a big fan of her new laid-back yet bold personality in this new swimsuit. It feels like she's grown out of a shell, probably thanks to her adventures with Neru and Rio throughout the Code Box event. And I love that the devs have gone all out with Swimsuit Seia, even giving her a mic and a new song to show that she finally has a voice. And speaking of which, she also got that adorable free-run face cause they have the same VA, the amazing Tanizaki Atsumi. Finally, we absolutely need to talk about that L2D. In my opinion, it is quite possibly one of the best and most creative L2Ds in the game. I mean, it is just absolute cinema. The moving background that really makes it feel like she's driving, the synthwave colors, the beautiful beach scenery, Seia never beating the cool allegations with that nonchalant driving pose as if she's our sugar mommy, and that banging city pop OST playing in the background. Man, it gives me huge Vice City vibes, and I'm definitely pulling her just for this L2D. So, what kind of student is she? Well, Swimsuit Seia is a limited piercing striker supporter with blue armor, whose terrain modes are as follows: S combat power in urban terrains, B combat power in field, and D combat power indoors. She also uses gloves, pin, and necklace for her equipment, with the pin giving her a bit more max HP, while the necklace boosts her healing power. So, is Swimsuit Seia any good? Well, unlike her regular version, who is mainly a core supporter, Swimsuit Seia is primarily an EX skill damage hyper buffer, being somewhat similar to Kisaki, except that she's a striker. More on their comparisons in the next segment. This is thanks to a cheap 3-cost EX that allows her to buff one unit's EX skill damage except herself by a whopping 74.1% for a decent 25 seconds at max level skill. For my veteran senseis, y'all already know what this buff does and how powerful it is. You guys can skip this part if you want to. But for those of you who don't know, maybe you're a newer / returning sensei, this buff type is one of the best and strongest in the game. In my opinion, it is even more significant than attack / crit damage buffs when it comes to boosting the power of your student's EX skill, though the former two are still obviously important. Not to mention, this buff is extremely rare since there's currently only 2 students in the game who are able to apply it, hence making it extra valuable. Not only that, her ability to boost the power of your student's EX skill by a whole 74.1% at max level skill is also really potent, since she can essentially almost double your unit's DPS. However, as the name suggests, it only buffs EX skills. It doesn't increase the damage of normal attacks, basic or sub skills. Plus, it is only effective on damage dealing EXs, and it won't work on students who either have self buff / direct buff EXs, nor is it as good for those whose damage output primarily comes from other sources, even if they have EXs that can dish out damage, which is why you need to be aware of the DPS unit you're using before applying Swimsuit Seiya's buff on them, as it is conditional. Plus remember, hers only works on striker students as you can't target special units. But who knows, maybe we'll get an EXU damage hyper buffer for specials during JP 5th Fest. So some examples of units who are very compatible with the EXQ damage buff would be your typical powerful damage dealers like Aru, Azusa, Dress Hina, Toki, Iori, Mika, Uniform Neru, Swimsuit Hasumi, Maid Aris, Bakamo, Hinata, Nyuya Mutsuki, Swimsuit Hanako, Nozomi, Maid Midori, Swimsuit Mika, and etc. As a buff lets their already hard-hitting EXs deal a ton more damage. There are also specific units like Chiaki who cannot crit, so they will need her buff even more to make up for this weakness. On the other hand, DPS students like Ban Yoshimi, Shun, Sarika, Tsurugi, Pina, Shiroko Terra, Swimsuit Tsurugi, Izuna, Subaru, Maid Momoi, and Kirara all won't benefit from her buff, because not only are their EXs primarily self-buffs that don't deal damage, but also because their damage mainly comes from other sources, like their normal attacks and basic skills, making them auto-attacking or AA units. Not only that, even for damage dealers like Swimsuit Nonomi, Swimsuit Iori, and Sakurako, who can dish out damage with their EXs, they are still considered AAs because their damage mainly stems from their basic skills / normal attacks. That's why Swimsuit Seiya isn't a suitable partner for all these units, and you'd ideally just use attack and crit related buffs on them instead. It's also worth mentioning tanks, supporters, healers, a lot of whom don't have damage dealing EXs, obviously won't need her buff. And even for a number of tanks / supporters who can deal damage with their EX, for instance Mine, Swimsuit Saki, Kayoko, Swimsuit Kana, Akane, Miyako, Bani Asuna, Aoba, and Kikyo, their main role is to support the team through applying debuffs, CCs, etc. And their damage isn't as important, so you might as well use it on a proper damage dealer who will benefit from it more. Thus, Swimsuit Seiya's EXQ damage buff is very potent and effective, especially when applied on the right damage dealers. Plus, you can even stack it with various buffs from other powerful hyper buffers, such as attack buffs from Camp Hare, Himari Kotama, crit damage buffs hailing from Dress Aru, Swimsuit Nagisa, Akko, Nyuya Fuka, Christmas Serena, as well as type effectiveness buffs such as those from Swimsuit Hoshino, Nyuya Kayoko, Hikari, and Swimsuit Ui, to increase the DPS unit's respective weakness damage. Hence, combine Seiya's buff with all these, and it can turn your damage dealer into an absolute monster, capable of deleting and shredding through the enemy. However, do note that while this buff can and has made weaker students become more valuable, it is still more effective to use it on harder hitting damage dealers, cause it's basically letting the strong become stronger. Swimsuit Seiya can also apply this buff for a cheap 3 cost, and the 25 seconds is actually not that bad. It's longer than the regular 15 to 17 seconds, and it's a pretty standard duration for a striker hyper buffer. Next, a basic skill which activates every time she launches 12 normal attacks, restores the health of the ally with the lowest HP excluding herself, having a 103% healing multiplier at max level. But at the same time, she also heals her own HP by a bit with its multiplier of the same amount. Since Swimsuit Seiya wields a pistol with 8 bullets per mag, consuming 2 per shot, so she launches 4 normal attacks before reloading, it means the skill should proc before every third reload, which would take around 30 seconds to trigger, assuming there isn't much interruption, though its activation timing can still vary. The heals she provides are also quite decent despite the fairly low multiplier. I mean, healing is always helpful, plus its dual utility of recovering the health of the unit with the lowest HP as well as her own is pretty valuable, cause not only can she potentially rescue your dying unit from the clutches of death, but she can improve her own survivability, which is important as a supporter. Thus, this skill can be useful especially when it procs at the right time. Moving on, her level 10 sub skill increases her attack speed by 31% for 26 seconds whenever she activates her EX, with this buff helping to shorten her basic's activation time, since it allows her to launch her normal attacks faster, being able to reach the 12 normal attacks threshold quicker. Her enhanced skill increases her healing, which directly improves the potency of her basic skill's heals, while her enhanced skill plus at UE40 grants her an additional 19% buff retention, upping the duration of her EX skill damage buff from 25 seconds to around 29 to 30 seconds, and her sub's attack speed buff from 26 seconds to nearly 31 seconds. These extra few seconds can be pretty useful, especially for her EX skill damage buff, as it helps with slightly longer rotations / assists in executing damage rotations easier since you don't have to rush as much, while the longer attack speed buff can potentially let her proc her basic a bit more. However, her buff's base durations are actually already quite long, plus her low tree cost means you can easily activate her EX, and you consistently be using her powerful EX anyways to refresh your buffs. So unless you want to really min-max your damage rotations, or if you want the extra HP stats at this level to give her a bit more survivability, especially on harder content, or you have a ton of Paroxene / Eligmas to spare, then 3-star Seia is usually sufficient. Finally, at UE50, her urban combat power is improved from S to SS, whereas her piercing effectiveness is boosted by 10% at UE60. She doesn't need these levels at all since these upgrades mainly up her firepower, which isn't important as a supporter, and the only real benefit she gains from these high levels is once again these small additional HP stats. Not to mention, you'd need a lot of Eligmas, so you can at most just invest up to UE40, unless of course Seia is your favorite student. Overall, Swimsuit Seia is a powerful and an important striker hyper buffer who specializes in increasing your DPS units' EX skill damage, while also providing a bit of utility through her heals using her basic skill. For this next section, I like to briefly compare Swimsuit Seia and Kisaki, as both of them are pretty similar yet different in terms of their EX skill damage hyper buffing roles. Again, for my veteran players, y'all can probably skip this part if you want to. First and foremost, they both have distinct roles, i.e. Kisaki being a special unit while Swimsuit Seia is a striker. It's kind of like how Camp Hare is the striker version of Himari and Rio, as well as Dress Aru being sort of the striker equivalent of Fuka, Nagisa, and Ako. Thus, their different roles essentially mean that who you bring into the team very much depends on the situation and your circumstances, like which units you have, the enemy you're facing, as well as the team you're utilizing, as using either of them have their own advantages and disadvantages. For instance, as a striker, Swimsuit Seia allows for more flexibility in your team composition as she frees up a space in your special slot, which is already highly contested and limited at only 2 spaces in most content, letting you use other special units like another powerful and unique hyper buffer / a unit who can fulfill the battle mechanics, etc. Whereas before, you would almost always have to insert Kisaki into your team, making your team selection more rigid, since there'll only be one special space left. So now with Swimsuit Seia, you have more wiggle room for which units you want to use as your specials. For example, you can use her with a striker attack hyper buffer while using someone like Swimsuit Nagisa and Rio in your special slot, or you can also pair her with Swimsuit Shiroko or Himari since you previously wouldn't use Kisaki with either of them as their cost recovery subs would overlap. However, the disadvantage of Swimsuit Seia being a striker is that she herself isn't as flexible as Kisaki, since she can be defeated losing access to her buffs, and compared to the latter who can't die, meaning she can be used in literally almost every content, Swimsuit Seia isn't that suitable for content with Mystic and Sonic attack type enemies, since she'll take 2 times damage from the former and 1.5 times damage from the latter with her blue armor, though she is more effective against enemies with raid attack. This isn't helped by her pretty low HP, especially due to her lack of any HP boosting skills and her equipment not giving any additional HP stats aside from the hairpin. Not to mention, her use of a pistol means she is prone to moving forward quite a bit due to her range, further putting herself in danger. However, her self-heal ability somewhat compensates for this as it slightly improves her survivability. Now, looking quickly at their kits, Kisaki's EXQ damage buff is slightly more potent at 80.7%. However, Swimsuit Seiya's lasts longer by a whole extra 10 seconds. So while Kisaki can give your damage dealer her a marginally higher damage boost, Swimsuit Seiya's lengthier buff duration allows for easier / slightly comfier rotations. Plus, hers also works better with DPS units and strats that require longer damage rotations. Moreover, Seiya's basic directly heals an ally and herself, but Kisaki's provides a decently strong shield. Both abilities are useful at improving your unit's survivability, though the former isn't preferred in battles with reduced healing. Lastly, Kisaki has a bit more team-wide utility with her extremely useful cost recovery sub, letting your cost meter regen faster compared to Swimsuit Seiya's attack speed self buff, though it does result in more frequent / quicker basic procs. Ultimately, TLDR, even though both Kisaki and Swimsuit Seiya are EXQ damage hyper buffers, their kits are somewhat different and they each have distinct roles. Hence, for those wondering who is better, well, in my opinion, they are on the same level and don't necessarily immediately replace each other, cause who you use depends on the content you're tackling / your team you're bringing, and you would even use both of them in separate teams, especially on harder difficulty content. It doesn't mean one is stronger than the other. So, where can Swimsuit Seiya be used in? Well, as a powerful hyper buffer who can greatly increase your DPS unit's EXQ damage, she can and has actually been used in quite a lot of content, bar PvP and content / teams that require or utilize AA units. For instance, Fury of Set, cause that boss requires auto attackers as the power of EXQs is reduced by 80%. Not only that, again, she isn't good against bosses with blue attack, as she would take more damage. Well, I suppose you can technically use her, but it'll be moldy. And she is also not as effective in teams where other striker units are needed to fulfill the battle's mechanics, like in Gebura, where special DPS units are key cause striker students deal 75% less damage. So other strikers who can fulfill the raid's mechanics are preferred, or in specific niche Greg teams involving special DPS units. Regardless, Swimsuit Seiya has proven to be very useful in a ton of content, cause her ability to hyper buff your unit's EXQ damage is exceptionally helpful in dealing massive amounts of damage to the boss and potentially clearing the battle quicker. For newer players, while she isn't usually needed for early game content since the enemies in your mission stages, commissions, bounties all are fairly easy to defeat, she can still be a big help, especially for those of you struggling. Plus, it is also very much worth investing into her for the long term, as you would definitely be using her in harder endgame content in the future. Aside from that, Swimsuit Seiya has also been brought into joint firing drills, where you can use her in one of your teams if needed and Kisaki in another, to boost your DPS unit's damage or to simply rotate her cheap EX, clearing it faster and earning a higher score. Meanwhile, for raids, since her release, she can and has seen quite a lot of use in a number of them, becoming a big help in defeating these raid bosses and allowing us to continue one-punning most of them on Insane and below, sometimes even Torment 2 depending, while serving as an excellent hyper buffer for one of your teams, especially on Torment and Lunatic. Though obviously you still need the appropriate units, investment strategies, as well as understanding of the raid in order to one-team the boss / take on the higher difficulties, and you can't expect to immediately clear them just by bringing in Swimsuit Seiya. Specifically, for example, in the previous Bina Grand Assault in JP a few months ago, which will be arriving to Global soon, she was brought into a lot of Sensei's teams to significantly boost the damage of Swimsuit Mika, Maid Aris, Wakamos, Dress Hinas, etc. EXs on Insane and Torment, though you can definitely still use her to buff other damage dealers, and your team can be different depending on your roster, unless you're using an AA DPS like Shiroko Terror as a team's main DPS. There's also the Cheese Grand Assault, with Swimsuit Seiya being used to mainly buff your DPS units so that they can take out the minions and quickly deal damage to the boss, while taking less damage from the minions' raid attacks. Plus, onto Team Purple, she was brought into Phase 2 more as a longer buff duration can better support Swimsuit Mika, allowing our gorilla to very rapidly take down the boss when he opens up and becomes vulnerable. A few other raids she has been brought into include Perirodzilla, being used as an additional buffer for one of many Sensei's teams, though remember she can die easily against this boss since she takes 2 times damage from his attacks, especially the laser. A little bit in Horde to support Mika, but be careful as him and his pillars also have blue attack type on Insane and above while dealing a bunch of AoE attacks, as well as Yasot, the new purple total assault boss, specifically in phase 1 to buff Swimsuit Mika so that she can deal a ton more damage to the boss, especially once he gets stunned after dealing with the pillar mechanics. Plus, her survivability is improved as her blue armor resists his raid attacks. Overall, while I didn't include a few other raids, I could have, but this video is long enough. The main takeaway is that Swimsuit Seiya can be used in a lot of them, as a portal buff will be a huge help in clearing them. Plus, even in certain ones that haven't reappeared since the release, like Gauss and Wakamo hovercraft, she should still be a useful asset in one of your teams. All in all, should you pull for Swimsuit Seia? Well, in my opinion, yes, you should definitely pull for her, because not only is she a powerful and unique EXQ damage hyper buffer who is useful in a ton of content, but also because she is a limited student who hasn't had a rerun yet even in JP, since she was only released a few months ago. So I feel you should 100% get her even if you are a newer sensei, as she will be a good investment for the future, and especially if you don't have Kisaki. Plus, even if you do already have our favorite Shanghai Jinkani, hey, having the only other EXQ damage hyper buffer is a good thing, particularly if you want to take on a lot of content that require multiple teams. Not only that, gameplay wise, I'd argue that Swimsuit Seia has way higher pull value over Swimsuit Hasumi, cause the former is used in a lot more content as opposed to the latter who is only used in Yellow Tifa Ref so far. Thus, I feel you should prioritize getting Swimsuit Seia first with the free 100 pulls, as she is way more flexible than Swimsuit Hasumi. However, if you're content with just using Kisaki and you don't see a need for Swimsuit Seia, or if you prefer to focus on pulling for Swimsuit Hasumi instead, maybe she is your waifu or you're just hornier for her giant watermelons, or perhaps if you still haven't gotten Swimsuit Seia with the free 100 pulls and you need to save your Pyrox for Swimsuit Mika and Swimsuit Nagisa next week, maybe because you don't have a lot of Pyrox, then sure, I guess you may just skip her and wait for her rerun. But as always, if Seia is your waifu and you want to chill with her while listening to City Pop in her absolute cinema L2D, then go ahead and pull for her. And that's all for this review. Gentle reminder that the Swimsuit Hasumi and Swimsuit Ichika reviews will be uploaded in a separate video, which should be up in a day or two. I'll leave the link in the pinned comment once it's up. Anyways, thanks for watching, let me know who you're pulling for, good luck with your pulls, and I'll see y'all in the next one.